My brother's wedding gift from my parents was a down payment on a condo in Kelowna. Mine was a card with a Tim Hortons gift card inside, $50. I want you to hold that image for a second, not because I need your sympathy. I've had enough time to make peace with most of it, but because it matters to understanding everything that came after. I'm the older one, by 4 years. I finished school first, got a job first, moved out first. I did all of it without a cent from them, which I told myself was fine. Lots of people do. You take out student loans, you work weekends, you learn how to budget in a way that makes other people uncomfortable when you talk about it at dinner parties. I was proud of it, honestly. I thought I was building something real. My brother Dylan, he's always been the one they worried about. Not in a bad way, just in that specific way some parents have, where one kid seems more fragile, more in need of steering, more likely to veer off course without constant intervention. Dylan dropped out of his first university program, then his second. My parents paid for both. When he finally settled into a commerce degree at UBC Okanagan, they rented him an apartment near campus so he wouldn't have to worry about commuting. When he graduated, my dad called me to tell me how proud he was. I said all the right things. I meant some of them. I want to be clear, I don't blame Dylan. He didn't ask to be the favorite. He's not a bad person. He's just the one my parents chose, over and over, in ways so small and so consistent that it became the wallpaper of my childhood. Invisible until you step back and really look at the room. The condo thing happened 2 years before my wedding. I was living in Halifax at the time, in a one-bedroom I rented with my then-boyfriend, Callum. We'd been together 3 years. We were careful with money, the way people who grew up without a safety net are careful. Not anxious, exactly, just deliberate. When my parents called to tell me they'd co-signed Dylan's mortgage and contributed $40,000 toward his down payment, I was standing in my kitchen making soup. I remember the soup going cold. I remember saying, "That's so great, he must be thrilled," and meaning none of it. I didn't say anything else. I hung up, I finished making the soup. I ate it alone because Callum was working late, and I let myself feel it for exactly one evening. Then I put it away. That was the pattern. Feel it, file it, move forward. The thing nobody tells you about growing up as the overlooked kid is that it doesn't make you bitter right away. It makes you efficient. You learn to want less. You learn to celebrate your own wins privately because there's no one keeping track. You learn to be genuinely happy for other people, or something close enough to genuine that even you can't tell the difference sometimes. I was happy with Callum. That was real. He'd grown up in a small town outside Moncton, the middle of 5 kids, and he understood something fundamental about not being the priority without me ever having to explain it. We'd met at a work conference 3 years before in Winnipeg in a hotel lobby during a networking break, where neither of us wanted to network. We got coffee instead and talked for 2 hours and missed the afternoon session entirely. He asked for my number before I could think of a reason not to give it. He proposed on a Tuesday in our apartment with takeout from the Thai place on Barrington Street. The ring had been his grandmother's. A simple white gold band with a small emerald, because he said he knew I'd find a solitaire diamond boring. He was right. I said yes before he finished asking. We set the date for June the following year. A Saturday. The venue was a heritage property outside Lunenburg, a converted barn on a working farm, the kind of place that books up 18 months in advance and costs more than I was comfortable admitting. We split it down the middle, Callum and I. We didn't ask anyone for money. It didn't occur to us to ask. That's not how we operated. I sent my parents a save the date in November. My mum called the next day. She sounded excited, or her version of excited, which is warm and slightly distracted. Like she's smiling while reading something else. She asks about the venue, the dress, the weather in June. She said she and my dad were already planning to drive down from Kamloops and stay for the week. She said we wouldn't miss it for anything. I should have asked her to repeat that. I should have made her say it twice. The next 6 months were the happiest I can remember. Not because of the wedding planning. That part was genuinely stressful in the way all large logistical undertakings are stressful, but because of what it represented. Callum and I were choosing each other in front of everyone we loved. We were building something together on purpose. After years of building things alone, that felt enormous. I sent my parents updates. Photos of the venue. The menu tasting notes. A picture of my dress, which I'd found at a consignment shop in downtown Halifax and had altered by a woman Callum's mother recommended. My mum responded to all of it warmly. My dad less so, he's not a big texter, But he called on my birthday in March and said he was proud of me and that June couldn't come fast enough. Dylan called in April. He and his girlfriend Megan were confirmed. He sounded genuinely excited, which made me feel genuinely good. Whatever complicated thing I carried about Dylan and my parents, I set it down for that phone call. We talked for 40 minutes about the drive from Kelowna, about whether Megan got carsick, about nothing important. It was a good conversation. 3 weeks before the wedding, my mom called. I was at my desk, mid-afternoon, reviewing a contract for a client. When I saw her name on my phone, I assumed it was logistics. Had we figured out parking? Did we need them to bring anything? Could they arrive Thursday instead of Friday? Normal pre-wedding coordination. She did not talk about logistics. She said she and my dad had been talking and that they were so sorry, but they didn't think they'd be able to make it to the wedding after all. I remember the exact quality of silence in the room. The hum of my laptop fan. The sound of someone in the apartment above mine walking across the floor. I said, "What?" She said there had been some things going on. My dad's knee was bothering him, the one he'd had surgery on the year before. The drive from Kamloops to Halifax was long, and they'd been worried about whether it was manageable. And the flights were so expensive now, you wouldn't believe it. They'd looked and looked, but the timing just didn't work out. I want you to know something. The previous October, 7 months before my wedding, my parents had flown from Kamloops to Calgary, rented a car, and driven 3 hours to Red Deer to attend the grand opening of Dylan and Megan's new bakery. I knew this because I'd seen the photos on my mom's Facebook, 47 of them. My dad holding a cupcake. My mom and Megan in matching aprons. The whole family beaming. I didn't say this on the phone. I said, "Okay." And then I said, "I need to go." And then I hung up. Callum was home when it happened. He found me sitting on the kitchen floor, not crying, just sitting. And he got down on the floor next to me and didn't say anything for a while. When I finally talked, he listened to all of it. The condo, the tuition, the birthday cards that arrived late or not at all, the Tim Hortons gift card, the 47 Facebook photos from Red Deer, all of it, out loud for the first time. He held my hand the whole time, and at the end he said very quietly, "I'm sorry. That's not what parents are supposed to do." I asked him if we should postpone. He said, "Absolutely not." My future father-in-law, a retired carpenter from Moncton named Gerald, walked me down the aisle on a warm Saturday in June with tears in his eyes and a carnation in his lapel. The 2 chairs at the front reserved for my parents were not moved. They sat empty for the whole ceremony. Several guests noticed. No one said anything to me about it directly, but I saw people glance at them, and I saw the gentle, careful way Callum's family redistributed their attention toward me, filling in the space with so much warmth it almost didn't hurt. Almost. Dylan didn't come either. He sent a text the night before. "So sorry, sis. Megan's not feeling well. We can't make the drive. Thinking of you." A text. The night before. After confirming twice, I turned my phone off and put it in my bag, and I didn't look at it again until Monday. The honeymoon was 2 weeks in Prince Edward Island. Not exotic, but we both loved it there, and neither of us had ever spent real time on the island. We rented a house outside Charlottetown, drove around the red clay roads, ate lobster rolls, slept in. For exactly 2 weeks, I did not think about my parents. That's not entirely true. I thought about them once, standing at the edge of a beach near Cavendish, watching the water come in. I thought about them, and then I watched the wave break, and I let the thought go. We came home on a Thursday. By Monday, I was back at work, which was fine. I had plenty to catch up on. My dad showed up at my office on a Wednesday, 5 weeks after the wedding. I work for a mid-sized consulting firm in Halifax. We do environmental compliance work for commercial clients. My office is on the 4th floor of a building downtown. My dad has never visited me at work. Not once in 7 years. I didn't know he knew where I worked. He was in the lobby when I came down from a meeting. He was wearing his good coat, the navy wool one he reserves for occasions he considers important, and he was holding a manila folder with his name written on the tab. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller somehow. He said, "I was hoping we could talk." I said, "You could have called." He said, "You haven't been answering." This was true. After the wedding, I'd stopped picking up calls from my parents. I've replied to one text from my mom with, "Not ready to talk yet," and that had been the extent of it. I wasn't punishing them. I was protecting myself. There's a difference. We went to a coffee shop around the corner. I did not order anything. He ordered a tea he didn't drink. He put the folder on the table between us. It had papers in it, printed pages, some handwritten notes, what looked like a bank statement. He said that things had been harder than he'd let on. That since retiring 2 years ago, their savings had been moving in the wrong direction. They'd helped Dylan with the condo, he said, helped with some difficulty, like the word cost him something, and the cost of living in Kamloops had gone up, and his knee surgery had been more expensive than expected, even with coverage, and they were looking at a shortfall that they didn't know how to manage. He said, "We were hoping you might be able to help." I looked at the folder. I looked at him. I thought about the 47 photos from Red Deer. I thought about the Tim Hortons card. I thought about Callum's dad crying at the front of a converted barn in Lunenburg because someone should be there to cry for me. I said, "How much are you thinking?" He named a figure. It was not small, $12,000. He framed it as a loan. He had the paperwork for it, he said, pushing the folder toward me. All above board. I could charge interest if I wanted. He'd pay it back. I took the folder. I told him I'd look it over and get back to him within a week. I went back upstairs, sat at my desk, and opened the folder. What I found there surprised me, not in a bad way, in the way that a piece of information you've suspected your whole life, suddenly appearing in front of you in black and white, can be a kind of confirmation, almost a relief. One of the documents in the folder was a statement from a family trust I had never heard of. My mother's parents, my grandparents on her side, had established it years ago, before they died. I remembered my grandmother as a quiet woman who'd grown up in Cape Breton and said very little, but noticed everything. I hadn't thought about her finances. I hadn't thought to. The trust had two beneficiaries, me and Dylan, 50-50. Dylan's share had been dispersed 5 years ago. His portion, just under $60,000, had gone toward, among other things, the down payment on the Kelowna condo. My share had been sitting in the trust account, untouched, because according to the distribution terms, which my parents were named as trustees over until I turned 32, the funds were only to be released upon my written request, or upon the trustee's discretion. I turned 32 8 months ago. No one had told me the trust existed. I sat with that for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called a lawyer. I want to be careful here, because the next part of this is the part I'm still processing, not the outcome. I'm at peace with the outcome. The part I'm still sitting with is what it cost me emotionally to understand that my parents had not simply overlooked me all those years. They had, at least in part, actively managed the gap. My inheritance had been available to me since my birthday. They had not said a word. The lawyer I called, a woman who works in estate law on Spring Garden Road and who came recommended by a colleague, was very calm and very clear. She reviewed the trust documents and confirmed what I'd suspected. The trustees had discretion to release my share at any time after I turned 32. They had chosen not to. They had not notified me of the trust's existence, which she said was, at minimum, a breach of their fiduciary duty. Whether it rose to something actionable depended on the full picture, which she would need time to assess. She also said, gently but directly, "You should know that you don't need their permission to make a formal request for distribution. You can do that yourself." I went home. I talked to Callum. We sat at our kitchen table for 2 hours, going through everything, not arguing, not spiral planning, just talking it through the way we always do, treating it like a problem with a shape that could be understood and addressed. He asked me what I wanted, not what I thought I was entitled to, what I wanted. I wanted what was mine. That's all. Not revenge, not a confrontation, not a reconciliation on false terms, just what had been set aside for me by a grandmother who had grown up with nothing and had worked her whole life to make sure her grandchildren had something. I submitted a formal written request for distribution of my share of the trust. The lawyer sent the letter. My parents received it. My mom called within the hour. I let it go to voicemail. The distribution process took 11 weeks. There were some back and forth communications that I'll spare you. Mostly procedural, some tense. A few exchanges between the lawyers that my lawyer described afterward as fairly pointed. But the structure was sound, and my request was legitimate, and there was nothing my parents could do to stop it. My share was $58,412, plus interest accrued since my 32nd birthday. I paid off the remainder of my student loans. That was the first thing. I went online, entered the payment, and sat there for a moment after the confirmation came through. I'd been carrying those loans for 9 years. 9 years of minimum payments and careful management and telling myself it was fine, it was manageable, it would eventually end. And now it was ended. Just like that. The second thing, Callum and I put the remaining funds into a TFSA and started talking seriously about a down payment. We're not there yet, but we're closer than I ever imagined being at 32. The third thing, and this is the one that mattered most to me, I contacted the financial aid office at the university I attended in Halifax and set up a small annual bursary. It's not enormous, it's enough to cover one student's books and supplies for a year, renewable. The application criteria are simple: financial need and demonstrated effort. The name on the bursary is my grandmother's maiden name, not my parents' name, hers. She grew up in Cape Breton with 4 siblings and very little. She worked as a seamstress and then a bookkeeper, and she saved money the way people who lived through real scarcity save money, quietly, consistently, without expecting anyone to notice. She never talked about the trust. She just built it. And then she put my name in it. I think about her a lot now. The fact that she saw me, the fact that even when no one else was keeping track, she was. My dad called again, 3 weeks after the distribution was completed. It was a Sunday morning. I was making coffee. I answered. He said he wanted to explain. I said I was willing to listen. What he said was complicated and not entirely satisfying, and I won't recount all of it. He talked about worry. Dylan's years of instability, the fear that he'd fall behind, the belief that Dylan needed more scaffolding and I didn't, because I always seemed to handle things. He said it with something in his voice I hadn't heard often, something that sounded like actual shame. He said, "I think we got it wrong." I said, "I know you did." I said it without anger. I was surprised by that. I'd expected to feel more when this moment came. Instead, I felt clear, settled, almost. I told him I wasn't ready to pretend it hadn't happened. I told him I wouldn't be sending money, and I wouldn't be available for financial conversations. I told them that if they wanted a relationship with me going forward, it would need to look different than what it had looked like before, and that would take time, and it would be on my terms, and I couldn't promise what the outcome would be. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "That's fair." We hung up, and I finished making my coffee, and Callum came into the kitchen in his socks and poured himself a cup and didn't ask how the call went until I was ready to talk about it, which was about 20 minutes later, sitting on the couch with the cat between us. I don't have a tidy conclusion for you. My relationship with my parents is a work in progress. I talk to my mom occasionally, short calls, careful ones. I haven't spoken to Dylan since the wedding. The bakery in Red Deer is doing well, apparently. Good for him. I mean that. What I have is this apartment, which we're saving to leave for something bigger. And Callum, who gets on the floor next to you when you're sitting there and doesn't ask you to explain yourself before you're ready. And the knowledge that somewhere in a university residence hall in Halifax, a student who didn't expect any help is covering their textbooks for the year because my grandmother grew up in Cape Breton with very little and decided, quietly, without telling anyone, that her granddaughter's name should be in a trust. She was right about me. I turned out fine.